Pavel Andreevich was sitting on the bench with his head bowed. Next to him was a glass, which was almost empty. He was ashamed to ask people, so he sat silent. He only occasionally said thank you when someone put a coin in the cup. Soon he would get up and wander the streets. If he was lucky, he could buy himself a cup of tea and a bun today. He wasn't the kind of bum who drank everything he could. He had once been a respected man in town. He was a great traumatologist, so everyone talked about him. And then a terrible thing happened. He was on duty when he received a call that his wife and daughter were in intensive care. There was a fire in the apartment next door. The fire spread very quickly and his girls didn't have time to get out. A week later he was sitting in an empty apartment. First he started drinking, lost his job, and then he just closed the apartment and left for the street. He could no longer be there, everything reminded him of his family. Pavel Andreevich got up from the bench and staggered toward the park. He did not notice that the boy was looking at him, he did not notice anyone around him, and the boy has been looking at the old man for a long time. Vanya had been wandering in the street for a week. He ran away from home, deciding it would be better for everyone. He was sick, and as the doctors said, he did not have much time left without surgery. And his mother was already exhausted looking for money. Vanya followed the man and sat down next to him on a bench in the park. Pavel Andreevich noticed the boy and asked if he was hungry. The boy shook his head. "I'm not hungry, I'm just scared alone, and you don't look like a bad person." Pavel Andreevich asked how the boy ended up on the street. Vanya did not want to tell the truth and lied about running away from the orphanage. So they began to live together in a tent on the edge of the park. Only Pavel Andreevich did not like the boy's state of health. Even though he was a traumatologist, he could see when a person was in poor health. Pavel Andreevich decided that tomorrow he would take him to the hospital where he used to work. And today he went to the church, where there were to be many people. To raise more money, this time he did not sit on the bench, but stood right at the gate. After all, he would need medicine for Vanya. When half the people had gone outside, he noticed a woman walking in the crowd with some sort of leaf, approaching people and asking something. She was the last one out of the gate, crossed herself, bowed, and said, "Lord, help me to find my son." When she saw the man with the glass, she reached into her jacket pocket, raked up all the change and dropped it into the glass. Pavel Andreevich lifted his head to thank her and saw a piece of paper in her hand, on which it was written Vanya. He asked the woman what kind of boy she was looking for. When he found out that Vanya ran away from home and not from the orphanage, he decided to walk her to the boy. As they walked to the park, the woman told him what had happened. Her name was Tatiana, her son has a serious illness. A very expensive operation was required, but her family did not have that much money. So the boy decided to run away from home, leaving a note that she would feel better without him and would not have to work several jobs. "And how will I be better off without him? I can't eat or sleep, he's all I have, and I'll fight for him to the last." When they arrived and Tatiana saw Vanya sleeping in the tent, she could not hold back her tears. The boy was surprised to see his mother, but did not refuse to go home with her. Pavel was also offered to go with them, but he politely declined, promising to visit them in the hospital. They left and he stood there looking after them. Today he ate a hearty meal and went to bed early, but he did not get much sleep. Vanya and Tatiana were on his mind, he really wanted to help this family. But even if he sold his apartment, there would not be enough money. Pavel came out of his hiding place. There was silence all around, and the stars were visible in the sky. So he decided to take a walk. After a while he saw two figures in the distance. The guys were throwing something in the trash. When he was sure they were definitely gone, he hurried to look. There was a briefcase on top of the trash can. In it were some papers and contracts. They were of no value to whoever had thrown them out, but someone needed them. He sat down on the bench and went through the papers. On one of the papers he saw a name and address. It took him about an hour to get to that address. By the time he reached the high gate, it had already dawned outside. No sooner had he pressed the bell button than a security guard opened the door for him. Pavel had a hard time convincing him that he needed their chief, Ivan Viktorovich. The chief was awake. He had been out all night, then back in the house. 10 minutes later the same guard opened the door and invited Pavel in. A young man was sitting in a gazebo outside the house, drinking tea. Pavel went up to him and took his briefcase out of his bag. He did not dare to carry it like that, for fear people would think he had stolen it, because the appearance of the briefcase was in no way compatible with his appearance. Ivan took the briefcase and frantically went through the papers. Everything was in place. "What is your name?" "Pavel Andreevich," the man introduced himself. "I saw two people in the park throwing a briefcase into the trash, and I thought that these papers were important to its owner, found the address and came." "You walked?" "Of course, I don't have a car," Pavel smiled. "You have no idea how much these papers mean to me, you are my savior. And somehow I think I know you." "Anything is possible, I used to be a trauma surgeon," answered Pavel. "Exactly," exclaimed Ivan. "So this is the second time you've saved me. 10 years ago, you put my arm back together in pieces, and now I can move it just fine. Even though the other doctors said it wasn't real. And yes, I don't ride a motorcycle anymore. I wanted to thank you when I recovered, but they told me you weren't working anymore. What happened to you?" And Pavel told him his story. "Pavel Andreevich, how can I thank you? Ask me anything you want. Would you like me to buy you a house or a car?" "Ivan, I don't need it, I've got everything I need. But there's your little namesake, who really needs help." And he told about the boy and his mother. Ivan promised to help, but he also took a promise from Pavel Andreevich that he would give up his life on the street and he would help him do it. Then Pavel was taken by car to his apartment. It was hard to cross the threshold, but it had to be done, because you can't go to the hospital dressed like that. On Wednesday, two men stood on the doorstep of the hospital room. Tatiana did not immediately recognize Pavel Andreevich. Of course he was unrecognizable. He was dressed in a clean suit and had shaved off his beard. "Tatiana, Vanya, meet Ivan Andreevich." He fully paid for Vanya's surgery and the rehabilitation afterwards. Tanya did not know what to say and could only smile, while tears rolled down her cheeks. Paul visited Vanya almost every day, brought him books and taught him how to play chess. He also noticed that Ivan didn't stop visiting him either. 2 months later Vanya was discharged. On the doorstep of the hospital Ivan and Tatiana were waiting for him with a bouquet of flowers and Paul with balloons. After that they all went together to Ivan's house. There Tatiana and Ivan told Paul and Vanya that they were in love, and she agreed to live with him. Vanya did not mind, he was happy for his mother. And Pavel Andreevich only smiled as he looked at them. He had learned to live with his grief, and now he was happy for the first time in 10 years. "Pavel Andreevich, we also have a surprise for you." Ivan stood up and called everyone after him. At the other end of the site stood a small log cabin. "This is your house. I know you wouldn't agree to live with us in the big house, but we don't want to let you go either." Vanya ran around Paul and shouted for him to open the door quickly. The boy was curious to see the house from the inside. Of course Paul stayed to live there, and gave his apartment to his niece, who got married not so long ago and was expecting a baby. Vanya often dropped by Pavel Andreevich's house to play chess.